From a book by Four Arrows, also known as Donald Jacobs or Don Jacobs. It's titled Point of Departure, Returning to Our More Authentic Worldview for Education and Survival. This is from Chapter 3, Community-Oriented Self-Authorship. Knowing the power of intentional and unintentional trance-based learning and how the latter can make us susceptible to believing untoward communication from authority figures, we can understand one reason self-authorship is important in the indigenous worldview. When we natural trance awareness helps prevent misdirection from external influences. It gives us the authority for what we can then instill in our minds to achieve. If someone such as a trusted shaman or psychologist has, certain skills at hypnosis, we might tentatively authorize him or her to help us form the most effective images, but we do so with full awareness. More important than avoiding negative influence from perceived authority figures, however, is the self-authorship via indigenous worldview that gives high degrees of individual autonomy to people while at the same time assuring that people use their freedoms to help their communities. In the indigenous worldview, the highest authority for all decisions comes from one's personal, honest reflection on lived experience with the understanding that everything is related. It is this understanding that makes a distinction between self-authorship, as it is generally perceived in the dominant worldview, and that of the indigenous one. Self-authorship is always ultimately in the service of the greater good in the latter. Self-authorship in indigenous ways of thinking comes from knowing that the highest experience for decisions comes from honest reflection on lived experience in light of realizing that everything is related in life, and this interconnectedness must be a part of all decisions. Michael Anthony Hart gets to these ideas about inner authority coming from such reflection. Through inward exploration, tapping into creative forces that run through all life, individuals come to subjectively experience a sense of wholeness. This exploration is an experience in context, where the context is the self in connection with happenings, and the findings from such experience is knowledge. Happenings may be facilitated through rituals or ceremonies that incorporate dreaming, visioning, meditation, and prayer. The findings from such experiences are encoded in community praxis as a way of synthesizing knowledge derived from introspection. Hence, indigenous peoples' cultures recognize and affirm the spiritual through practical applications of inner space. Such a holistic understanding of accessing, trusting, and exercising our Indian knowledge synthesis we need for addressing our global problems. While Ehrman refers to this inner authority with the Cree term mamatawisin, which is the capacity to tap the creative life forces of the inner space by the use of all the faculties that consume our being, it is to exercise inwardness. This understanding is missing from our dominant worldview, where objective-based outward exploration is sought for guidance rather than introspective knowledge development. Dependence on external authority is the rule in spite of the call to question authority that has always resonated on the fringes. Under the dominant worldview, obedience trumps community-oriented self-authorship. Decision-making is rarely a holistic process, nor does it utilize alternative states of awareness, deep reflection, and community praxis. The random quotations below, selected from an internet search, reveal that obedience to authority is common under the dominant worldview. Obedience to lawful authority is the foundation of manly characteristics by Robert E. Lee. All religions have based morality on obedience, Alexander Herzen. Obedience brings peace in decision-making, James Faust. Justice is the insurance that we have on our lives and property. Obedience is the premium we pay for it, William Penn. I was not born to be free. I was born to adore and obey, C.S. Lewis. Every game has rules. Life's a game that has its respective rules. Obey the rules, win the game, Israel Ahavor. A wolf cannot have more than one head, or it tears itself apart, Con Iggulden. From a social dissident on the fringe, Noam Chomsky wrote, any dictator would admire the uniformity and obedience of the U.S. media. From an indigenous-raised Lakota, Oyessa, the American Indian was an individualist in religion as in war. Reliance on external authority is not only the bedrock of choices in mainstream society and the main approach to moral development, but it also gives jurisprudence or guides jurisprudence and conflict resolution. Authorized punishment or revenge is a primary goal for wrongdoing. Under Indigenous worldview, bringing offenders back into community via affected members of the community is the goal. This relational approach expands the circle of land and seeks input from the wide circle of relevant people. Spiritual resources are employed via prayer or song, and subjectivity is as important as objectivity. Hart emphasizes this relationship as emphasizing spirit and spirituality, and in turn a sense of communitism and respectful individualism. And then he goes on about the Indigenous worldview and how it relates to what we would call communism. Point of Departure by Four Arrows.